Yeah, for the longest time, I wondered whether I was not staying with, whether it was, a problem that I wasn't staying with one kind of themes, But I'm just excited and inspired by different kinds of things, and they just find a space in my filmmaking work. So, each of the films I've made have begun from a question I'm asking or something I'm trying to figure out. And luckily for me, they've become films as well, as I've sort of, tried to read up about a person or a thing, it's also become a film somewhere along the way. I have many more things I'm reading about, but unfortunately, I don't get funding for everything, so they don't all become films. But yeah, so I mean, I think I'm just somebody who likes being inspired, and different things inspire me, and some of them become films. So it's really just that. I feel that a lot of times we try and keep ourselves in safe spaces. We try and move away from conversations which are uncomfortable, difficult conversations. And I think if there's one thing I've learned through the different films that I've made, it is this, that the more you try and stay away from difficult conversations, the more difficult life is going to be for you. The more you try and stay away from darkness, or what we think is darkness, the more we try and stay away um, from thinking about or talking about difficult circumstances or difficult situations, the tougher it's going to be to deal with them. So I really think that having conversations in a safe space, but having difficult conversations, is one of the most important things we could do for our own mental health. You know, and I feel very troubled sometimes, when people say, okay, I don't want to talk about XYZ because I'll be triggered. you know uh, I feel that, you cannot, life is not meant to be lived within a cocoon. You can't always be safe. Life will find a way of coming and poking you, and especially if you're trying to avoid something. I feel that, if you're trying very hard to avoid something, that will definitely come and, sort of stand right in front of you, demanding that you look at it in the eye. So I'm now a big, big, big votary, and it also comes from the experience of the Red Door, where, we do speak a lot with people who are given diagnosis, of mental illness, and we see constantly that a lot of the times the kind of distress that has occurred is also from very existential questions about life, and the inability to have, conversations about them in a safe way, in a safe space, is what also leads to a lot of anxiety about life, because a lot of life cannot be explained rationally. Unfortunately, it's not just, oh, you do X, Y, and Z, and you will therefore have, ABC results. A lot of times it's really random. Life is really random, and how do you make sense of it? How do you create a space for yourself where you feel a certain sense of assurance that that things will be okay, because things do get okay always, um, and I really feel that unless we look at the darkness, it is very difficult to find space for the light to come in. The Japanese have this beautiful concepts, say the wabi sabi, or this entire thing of, pottery, where if you actually have a pot which is cracked, that's actually better than one that's, without any cracks. And I feel that's true for people as well. We should embrace the difficult times, because they give us the solutions, they give us the answers to life. They are the key to really knowing how to live life. So yeah, so the cracks are how the light comes in. It's through the cracks that the light comes in. So we need to embrace the cracks so the light can come in a true way. So I'm very skeptical of just, optimism for optimism's sake, or positivity for positive, this whole be happy kind of a thing. I feel that if you embrace the darkness or the difficult times, you will truly be happy then. Then you will really find a sense of contentment that you wouldn't if you were just running after happiness. You just need to stand still for a bit, allow all the difficult times and the difficult situations to engulf you, create an understanding of it, and then you will truly find contentment, and that way you will truly be happy. So I think that is an understanding that I've received from my films. Why death? Largely because it really frightened me and it really scared me. And whenever I'm really scared of something, I try and do as much research on it as I can to try and sort of make sense of my fear, so that I wouldn't be, as paralyzed by fear as I would otherwise be. So yeah, so death as a subject was a result of that, of getting over my fear of death. And I think what also helped was that I had made a film about CanSupport, which is a palliative care organization that helps people with a diagnosis of cancer. And to see the palliative care workers be so comfortable talking about death, that really gave me something to think about, and I actually found it extremely inspiring. So the film actually left me really inspired. I'm not saying I know perfectly how to deal with death, or that I'd be absolutely okay if somebody close to me passed away. Not at all. But perhaps I have now the ability to think about it in a certain way that wouldn't completely destroy me. So I think that's enough, and I hope that's what more and more people can come to, because death is something that we will all face at some point or the other. And if we do have the tools to deal with the idea, then perhaps we wouldn't be as devastated. It would still be terrible, it would still be devastating, but perhaps we would know how to take care of ourselves a little better. There's this thing that they say about Bhutan. They say that people in Bhutan think about death at least 5 times a day. And I feel that perhaps that's why they're supposed to be the happiest country on earth. So maybe thinking about death is the key. In this particular film, One Mustard Seed, when I began making it, I went through this process where I was speaking to a lot of people who had been through a process where they saw a loved person die. And it was obviously a very, very personal sort of experience for them. And talking about it each time was overwhelming for the people I was speaking with. So as a filmmaker, I really faced this sort of ethical dilemma, which was that I was, asking people I barely knew to share their thoughts on the process of dying when it involved a really close person, somebody who was really close to them. And I really felt that the film therefore demanded that I also make myself vulnerable and share a process where I had been through something similar, because I felt that it wasn't fair on me as a filmmaker to really sort of, in a sense, pry into somebody else's life and and then not make myself vulnerable as well. So like I said, each of my films, the format and the way in which I tell the story really emerges from the experience of making the film. So here, so when we first began to edit the film, we weren't sure how we would do it and how all these stories would come together. And it was, a process of trial and error. And eventually the right note we felt was struck only when I began to bring the personal element in. So that's how One Mustard Seed emerged. So it comes from a story which is mentioned in the film.
Okay.
So there's this. So see how films sort of connect, right? So my film on schizophrenia led me to read a lot about Buddhism. That's how my films on Buddhism happened. And Buddhism is all about making peace with difficult situations in your life, and that's how the film. That's how my work in Buddhism helped me with One Mustard Seed. So in Buddhism, there is this story about a woman by the name of Kisa who loses her child, and that's a story that really spoke to me because I'm also a mother to a 4.5-year-old, and I really don't know if there could be anything worse than the idea of losing your child. So Kisa loses her child and she goes mad with grief, and she refuses to allow her little baby to be buried. She roams around, from village to village, house to house, begging anyone at all, if only they could bring her baby back to life. Finally, there's somebody, a kind soul, he takes pity on her and he says, hey, why don't you go meet this one saint, this one sage who's sort of going from village to village. Perhaps he'll have a solution to your problem. The person that she was asked to go to was the Buddha, as the story goes. So she goes to the Buddha and she asks for help. She's like, can you please bring my baby back to life? I believe you're an enlightened soul, you're a great man. Can you please just bring my baby back to life? So the Buddha says, okay, I will, don't worry, I'll bring your baby back to life. All you need to do is bring me one mustard seed from a house which has not seen death. So Kisa goes from house to house, and this is many centuries ago, right? So everybody lived in, joint families, and it was impossible for any house to not have seen death. And as she goes from house to house, asking, begging for that one, seed of mustard, which she believes will bring her baby back to life, somewhere around that, through that journey, she realizes that death is the absolute sort of, it is a reality that you really cannot question, and, and it is something that each one of us will face, and we will lose our loved ones. That's just how life is. And she goes through a transformation during that period, and finally she understands, and she herself goes and buries her baby, and she goes and joins the Buddha, and she says, maybe this is my path and this is what I need to do. So I found that a beautiful story, because it really illustrates how you also have to go through that process. It's not enough to just talk about it, to just tell someone, hey, it's over, death is fine. Sometimes saying those things really doesn't help, but you have to go through a transformative experience to really internally understand, to really internalize what has happened, and to understand what it's trying to tell you, what life is trying to tell you. So therefore, One Mustard Seed, that's where the name for the film comes from. I think it comes from my love of reading. I always feel that text is a more unobtrusive way of saying something in a film. I try and stay away from a voiceover as much as possible. Not always, because I feel like every film also, asks for its own format, and for its own way of telling the story. So I don't start off with saying, okay, this film will have this or not that or anything like that. It also emerges from the film. But generally, I feel that text is a quieter way of introducing an idea to the audience and letting them just stay with the idea without also having to process. Because, when you read, there's also an internal voice going on, So I feel that it connects you more with the film than having a voiceover come and say the same thing to you. So that's the reason I use a lot of text. In fact, my editor just hates it. She's like, oh my God, again text. She's like, please. And I tend to write really long sentences. And she's like, please, can you just pare that down? It's too long. So yeah, we're constantly battling that one, my editor and I. Pooja Iyengar, who's like amazing, by the way. Well, it's something that just happened organically. I didn't begin with making films thinking I wanted to change anything. When I made A Drop of Sunshine, I actually was extremely misinformed, and it was only during my research, which, by the way, is my favorite period of a film. I just love the research period. If I could have it my way, I would just keep researching all my life and not make the films at all. Unfortunately, there are funders involved and deadlines to be adhered to, and you finally have to make a film. So when I was making A Drop of Sunshine, which was a film on schizophrenia, I had in the beginning believed the mainstream narrative, which was that it was a diagnosis where, you pretty much, had to live a particular kind of life your entire life. Thankfully, I was wrong, and it was almost magical the way in which I was introduced to more and more people, more and more literature, more and more research, which proved beyond a doubt that the mainstream narrative was a false one. And I now have, when I made the film in 2011, I was a bit wary about what I was saying in the film because it was so against anything anybody was saying, and I was sure that, the film would really be battered, and it was, so for a lot of people who are and who believe the mainstream sort of paradigm, it was not a film that made them very happy. But I think it's also magical how things change, and it's almost a decade since I made the film, and now you do have more and more people talking about the importance of looking at trauma, the importance of looking at emotional distress as a causative factor of any kind of mental illness, what we call mental illness. So I think things change. Like I said, it's not something that I set off to do, but organically that is where I was led. And that really is why we make films, I think, because, I think the idea of making films is not to have a position when you begin with it, at least I'd never do. The idea is also to go on a little journey to see where the topic can take you, where the film can take you, where the theme can take you, and to be ready to change your mind along the way, to be ready to change your opinions, to be ready to be proved wrong. I think films are a great opportunity to be proved wrong. And I hope I continue to be proved wrong or whatever, I've just shown different kinds of things through the process of filmmaking.